Investigation surrounding the death of a local sports reporter. Adon Manzano was covering Super Bowl 59 for Telemundo, Kansas City.
With the shocking news that the Lions had also lost their teammate, Chuck Hughes.
The Super Bowl is meant to be a celebration of football, unity, and unforgettable moments. But behind the bright lights and roaring crowds lies a darker history. Over the years, this iconic event has been marred by unthinkable tragedies. With some deaths so horrifying they've left fans and officials shaken to their core. What really happened during these deadly moments? And why do some still remain shrouded in mystery?
Kansas City is coping tonight with the aftermath of the Super Bowl parade shooting that left one person dead and 22 others injured.
Here are the 8 most horrifying deaths tied to the Super Bowl, and they'll haunt you forever. Adon Manzano. In the same winter that the Eagles celebrated their Super Bowl victory, sports reporter Adon Manzano traveled to New Orleans for what should have been one of the most thrilling assignments of his career, covering Super Bowl 59 for both Telemundo Kansas City and Tico Sports. At just 27 years old, he was already recognized for his lively on-camera presence and deep passion for telling stories about the sport he loved. This was his 3rd time covering a Super Bowl, and it seemed like another big step in a promising future. Sadly, Adon's life took a devastating turn on February 5, 2025, when he was found dead in his hotel room in Kenner, Louisiana, not far from downtown New Orleans. His colleagues became worried after he failed to show up for a scheduled broadcast. When police arrived, they discovered signs that suggested something foul might have occurred. To complicate matters further, a woman identified as Danette Colbert was captured on surveillance footage leaving his room and later attempting to use his credit cards. Investigators have since weighed multiple theories, ranging from an accidental overdose to a deliberate act involving drugging and robbery. According to local reports, Colbert was considered a career criminal, with prior alleged schemes under her belt. While the autopsy results weren't immediately released, people close to the situation speculated that Adon might have been targeted because he was an out-of-towner in a city crowded with Super Bowl visitors and bustling nightlife. Some believe he was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Friends and family were left reeling. Adon's colleagues described him as an incredibly driven individual who had faced personal heartbreak just a year before, when his wife was killed in an unrelated incident. Left as a single father to his young daughter, he'd somehow balanced a demanding career with parenting, striving to maintain a positive outlook despite life's challenges. Those who worked alongside him admired his tenacity and down-to-earth demeanor, recalling how he genuinely enjoyed interacting with athletes, fans, and camera crews. His passing cast a dark shadow over the media community covering the Super Bowl. Fellow journalists paused their typical competitive spirit to unite in mourning one of their own. Several anchors and reporters wore small ribbons or armbands on air to honor Adon's memory. The New Orleans authorities, for their part, vowed to pursue every lead, affirming they would do their utmost to bring whoever was responsible, if anyone, before the law. Yet, even as legal proceedings inch forward, the heartbreak remains fresh. Adon Manzano's death serves as a reminder that alongside the glitz and celebration of a major sports event, unforeseen dangers can lurk. For fans watching at home, it's easy to get swept up in the excitement of the big game. But those who knew Adon personally learned, in the most painful way possible, that real life can intrude upon even the brightest moments, leaving behind questions that may never truly be answered. Kansas City Chiefs parade shooting. When the Kansas City Chiefs brought home a victory in Super Bowl 58, no one expected the celebration would end in tragedy. The year was 2024, and excitement ran high across Kansas City as fans prepared for the big victory parade. Streets were lined with thousands of cheering supporters eager to see their favorite players hoist the Lombardi Trophy once more. People of all ages donned red and gold, waving flags and chanting for the team that had captured their hearts. Despite the festive atmosphere, a somber note crept in on February 14, 2024, the same day as the official parade to honor the Chiefs. As the procession wound its way toward Union Station, a sudden and terrifying burst of gunfire ripped through the crowded area on the west side of the venue. Witnesses described the scene as pure chaos, people crying out, scrambling for cover, and trying to figure out where the shots were coming from. In the aftermath, it was confirmed that one person was killed and 22 others suffered gunshot wounds, including 11 children. By the time it was over, more than 30 individuals were hurt in some way, whether by direct gunfire or injuries sustained in the resulting panic. Officers and paramedics rushed in, navigating the crush of onlookers to reach those who were hurt. A few of the wounded were children who'd come just to catch a glimpse of their favorite players. Local officials, including Kansas City's mayor and police chief, condemned the violence and promised a swift investigation. As details emerged, it looked like an argument between a handful of people in the crowd escalated to gunfire. That perspective didn't bring solace to those injured or to the families of those most gravely affected. In the days that followed, the city was left grappling with an unsettling blend of triumph and heartbreak. The Chiefs' players dedicated time to visit hospitalized fans, offering whatever support they could. While the team intended to celebrate its victory, the heaviness of the tragedy overshadowed the usual post-Super Bowl elation. Many who attended the parade admitted they struggled to reconcile their joy over the win with the horrific memories of that day. Kansas City officials have since revisited their approach to large gatherings. Proposals for increased security measures, including bigger police presences and more controlled parade routes, gained traction almost immediately. Although there's no perfect solution to keep every big celebration entirely safe, the hope moving forward is that vigilance and better planning might prevent future incidents. The painful lessons learned on that February day remain a sobering reminder that even the happiest moments can be clouded by sudden violence. Philadelphia Eagles parade shooting. Just 1 year after Kansas City's heartbreaking incident, Philadelphia was poised to throw a huge celebration of its own. In February 2025, the Eagles avenged their loss from 2 years prior by dominating the Chiefs 40-22 in Super Bowl 59, bringing the Lombardi Trophy back to the city of brotherly love. For fans who had endured a close defeat in 2023, this victory felt especially sweet, and countless people crowded the streets for the championship parade. Organizers mapped out a route ending at the iconic steps of the Philadelphia Museum of Art, a symbolic site that had seen its share of triumphant gatherings over the years. The weather was brisk, but excitement was high. Families with young children, older fans who remembered Eagles teams from decades past, and every generation in between lined the sidewalks. Philadelphia green was everywhere. Jerseys, hats, face paint, while folks sang fight songs in unison. Yet, in a moment that too closely echoed Kansas City's experience from the year before, the celebration turned frightening. Halfway through the festivities, shots rang out close to a main intersection, sending people scattering. 2 women, both in their 20s, were struck by the gunfire. Bystanders screamed, some diving behind barricades while others tried to pull the wounded out of the crowd. Within minutes, police officers on duty swarmed the scene, quickly detaining the suspected shooter. As authorities pieced together details, it appeared that the individual responsible for the shooting had a personal altercation that spiraled out of control in the middle of the parade route. Fortunately, the injuries to the 2 victims were not life-threatening, but the emotional toll was significant. Parents hustled their children away, leaving behind strollers and coolers, desperate to reach safety. Everyone was rattled. City leaders, who'd hoped this day would be a pure celebration, found themselves reliving the nightmare Kansas City experienced. They acknowledged an urgent need to strengthen security protocols for big events, noting that while police staffing had been increased, it still wasn't enough to prevent a random act of violence. The Eagles organization also expressed shock and sadness, reiterating their commitment to stand by the city and the injured fans however they could. In the aftermath, many Philadelphians felt angry and disappointed. They'd waited years for another Eagles championship, only to have the day marred by fear. While the majority of fans eventually returned to join in the festivities, grateful the shooting had been contained. The event served as a stark warning that even the best-laid plans can unravel when tensions or personal disputes mix with massive crowds. Local officials vowed to review the day's security measures and work toward keeping future triumphs free of such terrifying interruptions. Laura Patterson, Laura Dinky. Patterson's story is a blend of high-flying excitement and unforeseen tragedy. She was a professional stunt performer, known for her daring spirit and unique ability to make extreme feats look surprisingly effortless. In January 1997, Laura was preparing for what many saw as a dream opportunity, performing during the Super Bowl 31 halftime show in New Orleans. As part of a bungee jumping crew, she was tasked with leaping from a towering truss, setting the stage for a breathtaking spectacle that would dazzle millions of viewers on television. In real life, though, rehearsal can sometimes be just as risky as the main performance. Laura had done countless jumps throughout her career, each one requiring intense concentration, skill, and a clear head. On that particular day, the production team was running through final safety checks. Adrenaline was high, and everyone was focused on nailing every aspect of the halftime show. Laura, cheerful and confident, climbed to the jump platform with her teammates to practice. During one of the rehearsal jumps, something went terribly wrong. Exact details are still somewhat unclear, but what is certain is that Laura's equipment failed or malfunctioned in a critical moment. She was supposed to rebound gently after reaching the end of her bungee line, but instead, she plummeted headfirst onto the concrete below. The impact was instantly fatal. Her fellow performers and the production staff rushed to her side, but they could do little more than call for help. Emergency medical teams arrived quickly, yet Laura was already beyond saving. Her untimely death sent shockwaves through the Superdome. Everyone involved in the halftime show felt the raw weight of this loss. Out of respect, the producers made adjustments to the performance, and many of the dancers and stagehands wore small tributes to Laura on their costumes. Despite the excitement of Super Bowl Sunday, a somber note hung in the air. Laura's family was devastated. They knew she was no stranger to danger. She'd spent years performing bold stunts, but it never lessened the pain of losing her. Discussions soon arose about the level of oversight and safety regulations for such live events. Questions about harness checks, supervision, and emergency procedures became more urgent than ever. In the weeks that followed, many in the entertainment and sports industries demanded stricter safety measures for performances involving high-risk stunts. Over time, some changes did come about, including more thorough inspections and clearer guidelines about how such acts should be conducted. While nothing could bring Laura back, her tragic passing highlighted the hidden hazards that even skilled professionals face. Tyler Sabathia. Tyler Sabathia's story unfolds far from the bright stadium lights of an NFL field, yet his tragedy is still tied to football's powerful impact on fans. At 18 years old, Tyler was a freshman at Temple University. Having grown up in Toronto, he was still getting used to life in Philadelphia. When the Eagles secured their NFC Championship victory in January 2023, the entire city erupted with excitement. Tyler, like thousands of other fans, headed to downtown Philadelphia to celebrate. Fleets of revelers crowded the streets, climbing light poles and chanting team slogans. It was a moment of pure happiness for the city's football faithful. While scaling light poles was famously risky, the excitement often overshadowed any sense of danger. Tyler, caught up in the thrill of the night, decided to follow suit. Witnesses say he climbed one of the poles near 15th and Market Streets, a common spot for fan gatherings. Shortly after he made it up, he lost his footing, slipped, and fell backward to the concrete. The crowd gasped, and a few bystanders immediately called for help. Tyler hit his head hard upon impact, and the injury was severe. Paramedics rushed him to the hospital, where doctors did everything they could to save him. For a brief time, he was placed on life support. His family, who lived hundreds of miles away, had to race to Philadelphia, praying for a miracle. Sadly, Tyler's injuries were too extensive, and he passed away just days later. His death shocked not only those who were there that night, but also anyone who heard about this young student's life cut short during what was supposed to be a happy occasion. The aftermath raised questions about fan behavior, city infrastructure, and the role of excitement in sporting events. Philadelphia officials had tried before to discourage pole climbing, even resorting to coating poles with grease or other slippery substances. But these measures were more of a playful tradition than a reliable form of prevention. After Tyler's death, calls for stricter crowd control grew louder. Some questioned if the city should impose penalties for dangerous acts of celebration, or station more officers at hotspots where fans tend to gather. Corey Stringer's death remains one of the most alarming events in modern NFL history, primarily because it revealed how something as basic as heat can claim the life of an elite athlete. Corey was an offensive lineman for the Minnesota Vikings, known by fans and teammates for his massive frame, gentle personality, and reliable performance on the field. He had already established himself as a Pro Bowl player, so the sky seemed to be the limit for his career. During the Vikings' 2001 preseason training camp in Mankato, Minnesota, the weather was sweltering. Temperatures soared, and the humidity made it even worse. Still, Corey suited up, determined to give his best at practice. The intensity of NFL training camps is well known. Players endure hours of drills in pads and helmets, pushing their bodies to the limit. Unfortunately, on July 31st, Corey's body couldn't keep up with the demands of that brutal heat. He showed signs of heat exhaustion during practice, reportedly vomiting and struggling to continue drills. By the time practice ended, Corey collapsed. Coaches and medical staff rushed to help, realizing the severity of the situation. Despite being rushed to a nearby hospital, Corey suffered from complications related to heat stroke and passed away the next day. He was just 27 years old. The shock reverberated across the NFL. Here was a professional who had access to team doctors, trainers, and presumably the best facilities money could buy. Yet it wasn't enough to prevent this tragedy. Media outlets asked tough questions. Were training sessions monitored properly? Were players given enough water breaks? Did team culture encourage pushing through symptoms to the point of danger? Corey's widow, Kelsey Stringer, became a prominent advocate for player safety. She filed a lawsuit against the Vikings and the NFL, demanding accountability and better protective measures for athletes. Over the years, teams added more refined heat protocols, often scheduling practice earlier in the morning or later in the evening to avoid peak temperatures. There was also renewed emphasis on recognizing the warning signs of heat exhaustion and heat stroke. Teammates recall Corey as a caring individual who always tried to help others. Even though his passing left a void in the Vikings locker room, it did spur significant changes in how NFL teams handle extreme conditions. Today, you'll find advanced tracking for players' core temperatures and consistent hydration breaks, all partly inspired by Corey's tragic fate. His story stands as a painful reminder that while football can be thrilling, it can also be brutally unforgiving if safety protocols aren't firmly in place. Chuck Hughes. Chuck Hughes holds a sad distinction in NFL history. He's the only player to die on the field during a regular season game. Born in Texas, Chuck had a real passion for football that guided his life from high school days all the way to the pros. He played college ball at Texas Western, now the University of Texas at El Paso, where he set several receiving records. His strong performance caught the attention of NFL scouts, leading him to a career in pro football. By the time 1971 rolled around, Chuck was playing wide receiver for the Detroit Lions. On October 24th of that year, the Lions faced off against the Chicago Bears in a game that would become etched in football lore for tragic reasons. In the fourth quarter, Chuck suddenly collapsed. At first, many believed he had simply fallen from a hard hit, but there was no direct contact right before he went down. Lions and Bears players alike stood in stunned silence as medical personnel rushed onto the field. Team doctors and trainers tried everything they could to revive him. The stadium, which had been filled with raucous cheering just moments before, fell into deep quiet. Chuck was hurried to the hospital, but he never regained consciousness. Reports later revealed he had suffered a major heart attack due to undiagnosed coronary artery disease. News of his death rippled through the league almost immediately. Fans were horrified that a young professional athlete, seemingly in great shape, could suddenly suffer a fatal cardiac event mid-game. His teammates spoke about how nothing in Chuck's training or medical exams had hinted at such a severe underlying condition. In the days that followed, the Lions wore patches in his memory, and the team supported Chuck's family as they dealt with the emotional and financial fallout. His wife, Sharon, became an advocate for advanced heart screenings, hoping to prevent other families from experiencing the same heartbreak. Dutiful though the NFL might have been in providing standard medical care at the time, Chuck's passing was a wake-up call for more comprehensive health evaluations for athletes. He was only 28 when he died, leaving behind a legacy that is both inspiring and tragic. Inspiring because Chuck embodied the dream of making it to the big leagues through hard work and talent. Tragic because he never got to enjoy a long career or a future beyond sports. His death remains a somber footnote whenever people discuss the NFL's history and the unpredictable risks of athletic competition. Stan Malden. Stan Malden was an offensive lineman for the Chicago Cardinals, and he played during an era when football was tough, gritty, and far less regulated than it is today. Protective gear was more rudimentary back then, and medical knowledge of sports injuries was still developing. Despite these challenges, Stan loved the game and dedicated himself to excelling on the field. On September 24, 1948, after a game against the Philadelphia Eagles, Stan retreated with his teammates to the locker room. Emotions in the locker room are often heightened. Sometimes it's triumphant, and sometimes it's tense, depending on the outcome. On that day, Stan suddenly collapsed without warning. At first, people weren't sure if he was just exhausted or if he had taken a particularly bad hit. But it soon became clear this was more than mere fatigue. Coaches and trainers tried to revive him, but to no avail. By the time medical professionals arrived, Stan's life had slipped away. He was declared dead from a heart attack at the young age of 27. News outlets relayed the heartbreaking story to a growing nationwide audience that was just beginning to follow pro football regularly. The Chicago Cardinals organization was shaken to its core. Teammates who had just shared the field with Stan were left wrestling with the realization that a friend who'd been perfectly fine a few minutes earlier was now gone. It was a grim reminder that even though football wasn't as big as it would later become, it already carried substantial physical risks. Stan's death marked one of the earliest well-documented cases of a pro football player dying in connection with the sport. His passing emphasized the fact that heart conditions could lurk beneath an athlete's outward appearance of peak fitness. Back then, rigorous screenings for such issues were practically non-existent. Most teams did little more than basic health checks and weighed a player's ability to run, tackle, and endure. Even though time has marched on, Stan Malden's story endures. Football historians mention him as part of a somber legacy that helped prompt incremental improvements in medical supervision and screening over the decades. Modern players benefit from many more layers of care: team doctors, specialized trainers, and advanced technology that can detect hidden heart problems much earlier. Stan's experience was a harsh lesson learned at a time when the sport was still finding its stride.